We often talk about how to avoid conflict in relationships, but since we're imperfect, we might still raise our voices, so we can be impatient, dismissive, even unkind. And mistakes are sometimes unavoidable, but there is something you can always control, and that's how you make up for it. My next guest says repairing relationships after a heated conversation is vital for closeness and connection. And it's also one of the biggest problems she sees in her office. A parent or a couple who is unwilling to repair or doesn't know how. I mean, repair, pretty self-explanatory, but what does it mean in your world?
Yeah, so repair is anytime we go back to a space of disconnection, right, or of disconnect. So we go back to the disconnect, we take responsibility, and then we address the impact that our actions have had on another person. That's a space of repair. And we see this happen so often where we do misstep. It happens all the time, sometimes every day, right? And if we think of misstep, let's think of that as places where we're going to disconnect. There is disconnection between people, parents and their children, spouses, regularly. And so we want to repair that. We want to go back to where we disconnected. We want to take responsibility, and then we want to create that reconnection. And that's what we're trying to do with the repair, right?
Yeah, because it doesn't necessarily mean some big blow up. It could just be someone felt neglected or someone felt ignored, right? So what gets in the way of people? Ego, or is it more than that?
Yeah, those things can get in the way. Well, and it's important to recognize too why repair matters so much, because we can look at it and go, well, I want to reconnect with you, and that's obviously why it matters so much. But there is more to this. There's this idea and understanding that it's potentially the most powerful relationship strategy we have, because we will misstep, so we want to be able to reconnect. More importantly, it creates a really healthy attachment so that we disconnect, connect, disconnect, connect. So we have a healthy way of working with each other, given that we're both and all going to be imperfect. And even bigger than that, repair gives us this place where we can help write the story. And what I mean by that is, let's take, for example, a parent who yells at their children. That child then is going to write a story about what just happened. And the story that they're probably going to write is, my mom hates me, or I'm not good enough, right? They're going to write a story like that. They don't understand me. I can't ever talk to them. That's going to be the story that that child writes. When we repair, we actually help write the story. And we write it in a way that isn't based on that person or that child's insecurities and fears. So we go back to them, and when we're writing that story and we're taking responsibility, now the story they have is, Mom was overwhelmed, and I didn't handle that appropriately, and I'm sorry that I raised my voice. It wasn't right, and I'm sorry I put you in a position where you felt uncomfortable. Now that's the story that they carry with them. We want to help write those stories, and we want to make sure that they're really healthy. So that's why it matters so much.
Yeah, and not only does it write the story, but it sets like the example of how they should handle conflict as well, I guess.
Absolutely, moving forward. So then if we go to things that get in the way, shame is always going to get in the way of our willingness to repair. So remember, shame is when we make something about us versus guilt when it's about behavior. So when we shame, this is, again, a parent yelling or a spouse being unkind and deciding that I'm not a good wife or I'm a bad mother, versus I yelled and that wasn't appropriate, or I stonewalled and that wasn't appropriate. That's behavior. Now, the thing with shame is that it's paralyzing. So given that repair takes work and it takes energy and movement, if we're paralyzed, that shame is going to keep us from repairing. Blame is going to do the same thing. Anytime we blame is us getting rid of what's uncomfortable. So in order to repair, we have to take responsibility. So blame happens when I don't feel comfortable, and so I'm going to put it on someone else so I don't have to deal with it, which is essentially the opposite of a repair, because there's no responsibility being taken.
Yeah, if you would have just done this, I wouldn't have lost my temper.
It's exactly
That's
right.
the blame,
We've
right?
heard that as a parent, right? In our own heads, where we want to say that. I've asked you 50 times if you would have taken care of it, I wouldn't have had to yell at you the 51st time. The other thing that gets in the way is anytime we minimize. And we tend to do this in our relationships where we minimize what we've done. Oh, you know what? I've raised my voice at you much louder in the past. Or as a parent, we might find ourselves saying something like, oh, you think that was yelling? You should know or hear what I dealt with when I was growing up. Now that was yelling. And we minimize. When we, look at a spouse and say, I didn't leave, or I didn't stonewall, or that wasn't unkind. You say a lot of things that are much worse than that. When we minimize our behavior, we're not taking responsibility for it. When we minimize it and make it out to be not that bad, We are not about to go repair a situation to reconnect. We've just disconnected.
Well, it's that gaslighting we keep hearing about, right? That's what it sounds like. Okay, so what do we have to keep in mind? You say there's some certain things we have to keep in mind when we're ready to repair.
For sure. The first one is we want to make sure that we accept. And what I mean by that is we've got to accept that we are going to need to do this. We need to do this. And if we want to start thinking about the power behind this on a daily basis, it would benefit us in every single relationship. It isn't that the misstep is the problem. It's the inability or unwillingness to repair that's the problem. We will all make mistakes and misstep and do things inappropriately, unhealthy. We just want to make sure we go back. So we've got to make sure that we accept it. We also want to make sure that once we've accepted it, we self-repair first. So we've got to look at ourselves. We've got to make sure that we can calm down and we accept and acknowledge that the repair needs to happen, but it has to start here. This is where we make sure we don't shame ourselves. And this is where we're going to do two things. We're going to first look at the reality of it. So I'm going to look at a situation and I'm going to acknowledge I did do that thing that wasn't healthy. I'm just going to make sure that I acknowledge it through a healthy or a hopeful lens. So it's going to be looking at it and us saying, as a parent, I yelled at my son today, and I'm grateful that I'm learning new skills to handle that different next time. So I'm acknowledging what went wrong, but I'm going to do it through a lens of hope. So
Yes,
that I
like
don't
that.
feel paralyzed.
Yeah, and it's more, I shouldn't have done that instead of I'm a horrible person.
Right, I am that horrible thing, right? Now from there, we want to put a lot of energy into deciding if we're choosing to connect or if we're choosing to be right. And as parents and as spouses, we tend to get this mixed up. You can't have both. You cannot connect and be right at the same time. So being right looks like this. This is us recognizing we were unkind to a spouse. We think I should probably go take responsibility for that. And on our way there, we remind ourselves, yeah, well, they've been working late nights and haven't spent any time with me lately. And then we go to, well, anytime they're frustrated, they're always unkind to me. And now as a result of that justification, we're fighting to be right instead of to connect. And as soon as we switch over to being right, we're not going to go repair. We're going to step back from the repair. We won't reconnect, which is what repair is. Remember, it's to go to the space of disconnect and create a space of connection in its place. So we want to let go of being right and instead choose to connect. And we also want to make sure that we get in and we get out really quick. This is short and sweet. We're going to get in there, we're going to repair, and we're going to get out. And the reason is, if we stick around too long, people start to talk again, and we start to get defensive again, and we start to power struggle again, and we head down the exact road we're trying to step away from.
I love it.
So we want to be quick. Yeah.
In and out. And quickly, let me just say, you have these 3 steps for the anatomy of repair. State what happened, take responsibility, and say what you'll do differently next time. That's the 3-step process.
Yep. So if we want an example of that, this would be if we're going to state what happened. Let's say that we go to one of our children and we're very open to say, hey, yesterday, when I was making dinner and helping your sister with her homework, and you were trying to tell me about what happened at school, and I told you that I didn't have time, and that what happens at school doesn't matter that much because you're almost in 7th grade and you won't be at that school anymore, that was really unkind. And I was impatient, and I didn't handle that appropriately. That would be stating what happened. Then we're going to move to taking responsibility, where we say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I was unkind. I'm sorry that I was overwhelmed, and because I was overwhelmed, I treated you with impatience. What happens at school does matter, and I'm sorry that I was dismissive. That would be taking responsibility. And then if we go to that last piece to tell them what's going to happen different, it would be me acknowledging, next time, I'm actually going to work to find a couple minutes to sit down with you every single day so that I'm not distracted and you can tell me all about what happened in school. Or I'm going to do more work during the day so that I'm developing patience so that I can handle. That is telling them what's going to be different next time. If you want to start somewhere, start right there. Look at the situation and tell them, acknowledge what happened. Be true about it.
Yeah.
Take responsibility for it. And then be really open to say, hey, this is how it's going to
change.
look different next time.
I love that, because that brings us back to the hope that you mentioned earlier. It gives them hope that it'll be different next time. Heather counsels families and individuals, and you can find her contact information on our website. Thanks, Heather.